sun had not yet breached the horizon over Charleston, West Virginia, when Detective Sarah Hoffman stepped out of her unmarked sedan, her breath drifting in pale ribbons through the brittle January air. It was 6:47 a.m. on January 15th, 2020. Behind her, 6 other vehicles rolled quietly to a stop along the sleepy suburban street. Tactical units, FBI agents, forensic specialists, every one of them was here for a single man. The house before them looked no different from any other on Maple Ridge Drive. A modest 2-story colonial with a weathered American flag hanging from the porch. A child's basketball sat tipped on its side near the walkway. It was the kind of place where neighbors borrowed sugar, held barbecues, and waved from driveways. A place where families felt safe. But Hoffman knew better. In the pocket of her coat, she carried a warrant 21 years in the making. One that would shatter this peaceful Tuesday morning and send shockwaves through a community that believed it knew the man still sleeping inside. Across the street, blinds flickered as curious eyes peeked out. A dog barked. A porch light blinked on. None of these neighbors realized they had been living just 3 houses down from a monster. Hoffman's hand settled on her holster, not drawing, only ready, as her team fanned out, sealing every angle of escape. After 2 decades of unanswered prayers and silent grief, there would be no slipping away today. She strode up the front steps, warrant in hand, and knocked firmly on the door. 3 precise knocks echoed down the cul-de-sac. 30 seconds later, the door cracked open. A middle-aged man in a bathrobe stood blinking in the dawn chill, a mug of coffee warming his hand. He looked utterly ordinary. A husband, a father, a neighbor everyone trusted. Travis Woodward. Hoffman's voice cleaved through the quiet morning. Travis Woodward, you are under arrest for the kidnapping and murder of Ila and Norah Charles. The mug slipped from his hand, shattering on the threshold. Dark coffee splattered across the concrete like spilled blood. And just like that, 21 years of evasion came to an end. But to understand how this moment came to be, how an ordinary man hid in plain sight while a community bled from an open wound, we must rewind to May 14th, 1999. A day that began with sunshine, laughter, and a school field trip, and ended in a darkness no one could have foreseen. Spring sunlight poured gently over Huntington, West Virginia, as 2 11-year-old girls climbed aboard a bright yellow school bus, laughing, chatting, vibrating with the kind of excitement only a long-awaited field trip can create. It was a day they had looked forward to for weeks, a day they would never return from. But before we step deeper into this story, go ahead and hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and drop a comment below. Tell me, where are you watching from? Because what you're about to hear will make you question everything you think you know about the people around you. May 14th, 1999 began like any other Friday in Huntington. A morning where everything, at least on the surface, felt right with the world. Temperatures were climbing into the mid-70s. Birds trilled from maple branches. Families bustled through their routines, packing lunches, tying shoelaces, calling kids to the table. On Willow Street, inside the Charles home, twin sisters Ila and Norah were up earlier than usual. Today wasn't math quizzes or spelling tests. Today was the field trip, the one they'd talked about nonstop for 3 weeks. Ila burst into the kitchen first, her dark curls still damp from her morning shower. She wore her favorite purple windbreaker and the brand new sneakers she'd begged her parents for. Bold, energetic, unafraid, she was the twin who stepped forward first, who made decisions without hesitation, who never met a stranger. She wanted to be a veterinarian one day. Her bedroom walls were plastered with dogs, horses, dolphins, anything with 4 legs or a fin. Every Saturday, she volunteered at the local animal rescue center, earning the kind of quiet pride only a mother can feel. "Mom, did you pack the sandwiches? Turkey, not ham, right?" "Norah hates ham," Ila said in a breathless rush, rummaging in her backpack. 30 seconds later, Norah followed, quieter, more measured, wrapped in a pale pink hoodie and jeans. The same curls as Ila's, but tied neatly back. While Ila leapt, Norah looked first. She noticed things, questioned things. Her teachers said she had a gift for math and science. She kept a private journal filled with sketches of trees, notes on plants, and musings about the natural world. Maybe she'd become a botanist, or maybe an artist. She wasn't sure yet. "I don't hate ham," Norah corrected softly, smiling. I just like turkey better." Their mother, Patricia Charles, 36 years old, a nurse at Cabell Huntington Hospital, laughed from the stovetop as she flipped pancakes. She had taken the morning off just to send her girls off properly. Both backpacks were stuffed with turkey sandwiches, sliced apples, granola bars, juice boxes, and permission slips tucked neatly in the front pocket. Patricia turned toward them, spatula in hand. "Remember," she said, "you two are buddies today. Stay together. That's the rule." The girls nodded in unison, and with that, their last morning began. By 8:15 a.m., the Charles household hummed with that familiar preschool rush. Zippers closing, hair being brushed one last time, the hurried clatter of shoes finding feet. Patricia checked the girls' backpacks for the third time, not because she doubted them, but because that's what mothers do on days that feel too important to leave anything to chance. Outside, the yellow school bus hissed to a stop, its doors folding open with a metallic gasp. Children leaned into the aisle to look out, waving, calling to classmates. Ila was the first out the door, bounding down the front steps as if the whole world was tugging her forward. Norah followed, careful, holding her journal to her chest so it wouldn't bend. Patricia stood on the porch watching her daughters merge into the chattering crowd of kids. She raised her hand instinctively, calling after them, "Stay together! Stay with your buddy!" The twins turned in unison, flashing matching smiles, those small, sweet smiles a mother keeps in her heart forever. The bus pulled away, rumbling down Willow Street, sunlight glinting off its windows. To Patricia, it was just another school morning. To Ila and Norah, it was the beginning of an adventure. To the rest of the world, it was the last time the twins were seen alive. The ride to Lubeck State Park took nearly an hour. The children sang along to pop songs, swapped snacks, and pointed out cows grazing in distant fields. Spring in West Virginia was in full bloom, dogwoods bursting with white blossoms, wildflowers painting the ditches in purple and yellow, the mountains rolling like waves beneath a blue sky. Ila pressed her forehead to the glass, narrating every passing creature she spotted: 2 deer, a hawk, a sleepy farmhouse dog. Norah sketched the shape of the hills in her journal, shading the curves with quiet precision. The sisters didn't need to talk. They lived inside the same rhythm, 2 heartbeats tuned the same way. When the bus finally turned into Lubeck State Park, cheers erupted. Teachers clapped their hands to gather the kids, reminding them of the rules. No running off, no wandering alone, always stay with your buddy. The twins linked fingers, an unconscious gesture they had done since toddlerhood, and stepped off the bus onto the trailhead. The morning air smelled of pine and damp earth. The forest hummed with life. No one on that bus, not a single child or adult, could have imagined that the trail winding quietly into the trees would soon become the center of a nightmare, one that would haunt a community for the next 21 years. The students spilled out onto the gravel clearing beside the Oak Ridge Trail, their sneakers crunching softly as they formed uneven clusters around their teachers. The sun sat warm on their shoulders, filtering through the canopy in gentle beams. For the moment, everything felt light, easy, safe. The chaperones unpacked coolers and clipboards, roll call, buddy checks. The usual chorus of "Stay where we can see you" echoed across the picnic area. The twins sat together on a fallen log, unwrapping the pancakes their mother had slipped into napkins, just in case. Ila devoured hers in 3 bites. Norah, as always, ate with slow appreciation, eyes drifting now and then toward a patch of trillium blooming near the tree line. By 10:14 a.m., the class began their short nature walk along the Oak Ridge Trail, an easy, child-friendly mile that wound past ferns, moss-covered stones, and the sweet murmur of Willow Creek down below. The teachers stopped often to point out trees, insects, tracks in the dirt. Ila bounced from group to group like a spark of sunlight, while Norah hung back, jotting tiny notes in her journal. About 30 minutes in, the group paused at a rest area where an overturned log served as a bench. A breeze lifted the girls' hair. Someone complained they were thirsty. Someone else asked if they could go ahead. A teacher said no. Another said 5 minutes, that was all. Then Ila tugged on Norah's sleeve. "I need to pee. Come with me?" Norah didn't hesitate. She always went with Ila. Always. The two stepped off the trail toward a cluster of rhododendrons, thick enough for privacy, thin enough that they'd still hear the class behind them. A few of their classmates saw them go, A teacher saw them too, but thought nothing of it. 2 girls, 2 buddies, together. It should have been safe. A minute passed, then 2. When the group began to gather their things to continue down the trail, a teacher called out, "Ila, Norah, let's go." No answer. Another call. Still silence. A faint rustle came from the brush, then nothing. The children looked at one another, puzzled. A chaperone stepped into the greenery, expecting to find the girls embarrassed, laughing, tying their shoelaces. Instead, she found emptiness. The rhododendron branches swayed softly, disturbed by something, or someone, no longer there. Within moments, a ripple of unease spread through the adults. The trail, once bathed in cheerful noise, fell strangely quiet. In that quiet, a truth began settling like cold fog. The twins had vanished, and the nightmare had begun. Panic never arrives all at once. It trickles in, first as confusion, then concern, and finally a fear so sharp it steals the breath right out of your lungs. At 10:27 a.m., that progression began to sweep across the Oak Ridge rest area. The first search was casual, almost routine. A teacher brushed aside ferns, calling the girls' names in a sing-song voice, as though the twins might jump out giggling. But when the initial sweep of the underbrush revealed nothing, the tone shifted, voices tightened, steps moved quicker. The teachers fanned out, scanning the path, the trees, the creek far below. Kids sensed something was wrong before anyone told them. Their chatter faded into a nervous quiet. One boy lifted his hand. "Are Ila and Norah playing a trick?" No one answered. By 10:35 a.m., the adults had formally halted the field trip. 2 chaperones headed back down the trail to check if the girls had somehow returned to the starting point. Another stayed with the students, her face carefully calm, hands trembling slightly behind her clipboard. The remaining chaperones moved deeper along the brush line, calling out until their voices echoed like distant cries swallowed by the forest. A teacher knelt to examine the ground. No dropped pencil, no shoe print, no torn fabric caught on a branch. Nothing that said 2 children had been here just minutes earlier. At 10:41 a.m., protocol took over. The lead chaperone, a 4th grade teacher named Mrs. Halburn, pulled her cell phone from her fanny pack and dialed 911 with fingers she could barely steady. Her voice, though trained to soothe children, cracked as she said the words every dispatcher hopes never to hear. "We're missing 2 students. 11-year-old girls. They were right behind us. Now they're gone." Dispatch told her units were on the way. She was instructed not to move the students, not to touch anything, not to allow parents to drive blindly into the park. Help was coming. It always sounds reassuring on the other end of the line, but in the moment, it feels like pleading with a clock that refuses to speed up. At 10:59 a.m., the first ranger truck pulled into the clearing. By 11:12, 2 city patrol cars arrived. By 11:20, someone had already contacted the girls' parents. And by 11:30 a.m., less than an hour after the twins were last seen, Oak Ridge Trail had transformed from a cheerful outdoor classroom into the epicenter of a rapidly unfolding emergency. What no one realized yet was how vast the forest truly was, how quickly a predator could disappear into it, and how agonizingly long it would take to understand what happened in those missing minutes. The search had begun, and time was already slipping away. By noon, Lubeck State Park was swarming with more people than it had seen on any spring day in its history. Rangers moved methodically through the brush, marking search grids with orange tape. Local police set up a temporary command post near the trailhead, radios crackling with overlapping updates. The easy hum of a school field trip had transformed into a coordinated emergency operation. Parents began arriving in waves, some frantic, some stone-silent with fear. Patricia Charles was among the first. She barely remembered the drive, only the hollow roar in her ears, the way her fingers clenched the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. When she reached the clearing, officers rushed to stop her from sprinting into the forest. She kept repeating the same sentence, voice thin and breaking. "They never go anywhere alone. They always stay together. They always stay together." By 12:45 p.m., K-9 teams were deployed. German shepherds strained against their handlers' leashes, noses low, weaving through the underbrush in widening arcs. Officers waited for the dogs to catch a scent, any scent. A crumpled juice box, a fabric thread, a trace of sweat. something to anchor the frantic search to a direction. But the forest remained stubbornly quiet. At 1:03 p.m., the sheriff requested aerial support. A helicopter from the state police lifted off 20 minutes later, blades slicing the humid air as it circled over the canopy. From above, Oak Ridge looked endless, an unbroken stretch of green shadows and twisting paths where two girls could vanish as easily as a coin dropped into a river. Still, authorities remained hopeful. Children wander, they get turned around, they panic and hide. Most are found within hours. But Ila and Norah were not like most. At 1:47 p.m., a ranger radioed in, "Nothing yet, negative on the lower creek bed." At 2:10 p.m., checking the East Ridge, footprints but unclear, possibly hikers. At 2:26 p.m., requesting more units, we'll need to extend the search perimeter. Each new report pulled the air a little tighter. Each passing minute felt heavier. Then at 3:02 p.m., a small breakthrough. A volunteer, an off-duty firefighter who lived near the park, found something on a secondary trail about half a mile from the rest area. Something bright, something out of place, a pink hoodie sleeve, not torn, not dirty, just lying there as if gently placed. The discovery sent a shudder through the command post. Officers moved swiftly, caution rising in their voices. Hope flickered, but so did dread. Because a hoodie on its own didn't answer any questions, it only asked darker ones. The pink hoodie was carefully lifted from the leaf litter and placed into an evidence bag. It wasn't torn, wasn't bloodied, just wrong. Wrong in its placement, wrong in its stillness, wrong in the way it seemed to sit on the trail like a quiet announcement that something had gone sideways in a way no one wanted to admit. By 3:20 p.m., the command post had shifted from lost child response to a possible criminal investigation. Detectives arrived with notebooks already open. A mobile forensics van rumbled onto the gravel. Officers cordoned off the area around the hoodie, marking the ground with yellow flags. The chatter among responders grew sharper, more clipped, filled with the uneasy realization that this was no longer routine. At 3:37 p.m., searchers made another discovery, something smaller but equally unsettling. A granola bar wrapper, the same brand Patricia had packed that morning, tucked beneath a tangle of brush just off the Willow Creek Trail. Again, no sign of struggle, no footprints that could be clearly traced to a child, just another breadcrumb on a path no one wanted to follow. When the items were shown to Patricia, she recognized them instantly. Her knees buckled, and an officer steadied her by the arm. Around her, parents gathered, some crying, some praying, some staring into the forest as if trying to will the girls back into existence. By 4:10 p.m., word had spread across Huntington. People began to arrive, neighbors, off-duty officers, college students, to volunteer. Within an hour, more than 100 searchers combed the woods in expanding grids. Voices echoed through the trees. Ila, Norah, sometimes the calls sounded hopeful, sometimes desperate. By sunset, they sounded like pleas. At 5:02 p.m., as the helicopter returned for refueling, a veteran ranger named Don McCleary gathered several officers at a junction where Oak Ridge split into two narrower paths. He knelt and studied the dirt. "Something was moved here," he murmured. A patch of ground showed faint impressions, shallow and inconsistent, possibly boot prints, but too smudged to confirm. Leading somewhere, leading away. Detectives exchanged looks. A map was opened. A decision was made. The search perimeter widened, far wider. Still, no one spoke the darkest possibility aloud. Not yet. Just after 6:30 p.m., as daylight thinned through the branches, a call came over the radio. A volunteer on the Western Trail had found something else. Something larger. A backpack. Bright pink. Half hidden under broken branches, intentionally concealed. Every person listening knew what that meant. The forest, once filled with the laughter of children, now held its breath. A terrible truth crept in with the coming night. Someone had taken Ila and Norah, and whoever it was knew these woods far too well. Flashlights cut through the deepening dusk as officers converged on the pink backpack. Even before they reached it, they could tell this wasn't something dropped in panic or left behind accidentally. The branches covering it were snapped deliberately, arranged with too much intention. Someone had taken the time to hide it. Detective Marcus Webb, then a 42-year-old investigator with the Huntington Police Department, crouched beside the bag. The fading daylight glinted off the nylon material, Nora's name stitched neatly in black marker on the inside flap. Patricia had confirmed earlier that both girls carried their bags onto the bus that morning. Webb slipped on gloves, lifted the pack, and immediately felt the weight shift. It was still filled with what a child would take on a field trip: juice box, notebook, the unopened turkey sandwich. Items of a day that should have ended with yawns and stories on the ride home. The zipper felt grimy, as though handled by hands that didn't belong to a child. He closed the bag softly, almost reverently. By 7:15 p.m., floodlights were erected throughout the clearing. The forest, once idyllic and sun-dappled, now looked skeletal and hostile. The search party doubled in size. A command drone was deployed, a rarity in the late 90s but authorized in desperation. Volunteers were instructed to stick to groups of 4. No one walked alone. As darkness settled, fear began to thread itself into every conversation. No one wanted to say the words out loud, but they hovered in the atmosphere like smoke. Someone took the girls. The backpack was bagged as evidence. Officers photographed the area from every angle. On one nearby oak tree, barely visible unless you were searching, a small smear of dirt and fabric impression suggested someone might have leaned against it, perhaps while watching the trail. At 7:52 p.m., Webb pulled the other detectives aside. "This wasn't an animal," he said quietly. "And it wasn't the girls running off. Someone carried that bag here, someone who knows these woods better than we do." His colleagues nodded grimly. Meanwhile, search teams fanned out with renewed urgency. The calls into the woods grew hoarser, more frantic. A few officers tried to reassure Patricia, but even they struggled to mask the dread tightening in their own chests. By 9 p.m., the forest was a labyrinth of shadows. Every snapped twig made heads turn. Every rustle of leaves felt like it could be a sign, until it wasn't. Then came the moment that changed everything. At 9:14 p.m., a ranger's voice cracked through the radio. "We've got something. Everyone needs to get down here now." The urgency in his tone froze the entire command post. Because this time, it wasn't a hoodie, or a wrapper, or a backpack. This time, it was something far more alarming. Something that told investigators they were no longer searching for lost girls. They were hunting a predator. The call came from the lower slope of Willow Creek, an area the search teams had passed earlier, but were now combing again under stronger lights. As Detective Marcus Webb and several officers hurried toward the location, their boots thudded against the packed dirt trail, flashlights slicing through the blackness between tree trunks. A ranger was waiting for them, one hand holding his radio, the other pointing toward a patch of ground near the creek bank. Even before Webb knelt beside it, he felt the shift in the air, an invisible tightening, as if the forest itself knew something terrible had happened here. On the ground lay a small imprint in the mud, too small to be from any adult, just the faint outline of a sneaker, flattened, smeared slightly by moisture, but still unmistakably child-sized. Near it, barely visible beneath the edge of a mossy rock, was another mark, a drag, as if a foot had been pulled or lifted. The officers around Webb fell silent. No one wanted to speculate. No one needed to. This was the first physical sign that at least one of the twins had reached this part of the forest and likely had not left on her own. At 9:22 p.m., another ranger called out from a few yards away. "Over here! You're going to want to see this." Webb moved quickly, heart hammering. Beneath a tangle of briars, partially buried under loose soil, lay something metallic. He brushed leaves aside and pulled it free. A hair clip, pink plastic with a tiny butterfly charm. Patricia had said Nora wore one that morning. Webb turned it over in his gloved hand. A smear of dirt across the edge, no blood, but it didn't matter. This wasn't dropped, this wasn't lost, it had been discarded. By 10 p.m., detectives ordered the section of the forest temporarily sealed. Crime scene tape fluttered between trees. More evidence markers appeared in the glow of portable lights. A growing unease rippled through the search teams. Not panic, but a sobering realization. They weren't chasing wandering children anymore. They were following the movements of someone else. Someone who had been here earlier. Someone who had carried 2 girls through this forest. Someone who knew where to step, where to hide, where to vanish. Above them, the helicopter swept across the treetops, its spotlight carving white streaks into the darkness. Dogs barked from deeper in the woods, their voices tense, urgent. Patricia, held back by officers, watched the commotion from the trailhead. She didn't know yet what had been found, but she felt it. Every mother knows the moment when hope begins to shift. At 10:18 p.m., Webb radioed command. We're moving from search and rescue to search and recovery protocols, and we need state detectives down here, now. It was the first time, officially, that investigators admitted what everyone had feared since sunset. Someone had taken the girls. And that someone was still ahead of them in the dark. By midnight, the forest had transformed into a living grid of searchlights and shadows. The hum of generators throbbed through the trees, competing with the chop of helicopter blades overhead. Officers moved with the heavy precision of men and women who knew they were now racing a clock they could no longer see. Detective Marcus Webb stood at the temporary command post, a folding table littered with maps, flashlights, radios, and half-drunk styrofoam coffee cups that had gone cold hours ago. His face was drawn, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the terrain map. Every new discovery from the woods added another sickening layer to the puzzle. "What we're seeing," he said quietly, tapping the cluster of evidence markers drawn on the map. "This is pattern, not panic. Whoever did this wasn't running. He was moving with intention." Beside him, a state trooper exhaled sharply. Then he knew these trails. Knew them, Webb echoed, or worked here. The idea hung in the air like a bitter taste. At 12:17 a.m., a K-9 unit alerted on a section of ground near the upper ridge, a place too steep for a child to climb alone. Officers sprinted toward the coordinates, hearts pounding, expecting the worst. But instead of finding the girls, they found something else. A set of footprints, adult, deep, angled, overlapping, leading away from the ridge, following a narrow deer path that curved toward the maintenance roads used only by park staff. The same roads Ila and Norah should never have known existed. "Get casts," Webb ordered. "Mark every inch of this trail." As Tex worked, a ranger approached him quietly. "There's a service cabin about half a mile from here," he said. "Old one, mostly used for supply storage, sometimes by maintenance crews. It's off limits to visitors." Webb's eyes sharpened. "Show me." The team hiked through the darkness, breath misting in the cold night air. The forest seemed to hold its silence like a secret. Finally, the cabin came into view, a squat wooden structure, partially hidden by pines, no lights, no vehicles, no signs of life. But as they drew closer, Webb stopped. A lock on the door hung slightly crooked. Fresh scrape marks marred the metal. A footprint, adult-sized, stamped the dirt in front of the threshold. The hair on the back of his neck rose. He stepped forward, hand hovering near his gun, and nodded to the officers behind him. "On my count. 3, 2, 1. The door swung open with a splintering crack, and for the first time that night, every person in that cabin doorway felt it. Not just fear, but the terrible, certain knowledge that whoever took Ila and Norah had been here recently. Maybe minutes ago. And the forest swallowed the rest of the night in a suffocating, breathless quiet.